In this video, we're going to start writing code for the login process. So when the user is trying to log in and they provide their login information, if the login is successful, okay, they're going to be directed to the main page logged in with their notes, okay? Otherwise, they're going to receive an error message if anything is wrong in their form, okay? So let's go ahead and start writing our code. So similarly to the sign up process, we're going to send an AJAX call, okay, from the index.js file, okay. So that AJAX call is going to send information to the login.php file. So what we're going to do, we're going to copy the same code we used for sign up, okay. And then we're going to change it slightly, okay, for the login process. So we're looking at the login form, okay, and we're sending data to the login.php file. Now, if the AJAX call is successful, we're going to check the data returned by the login.php file. So if the login is successful, okay, the file login.php is going to return success. So we're going to check if the data equals success, okay, then we're going to direct or redirect our user to the notes page, okay. So that's going to be window.location, okay, and we're going to the main page logged in .php. Otherwise, the login.php file is going to return an error message, okay, and we're going to display that error message inside the login message, okay, which is right at the top of this form, okay. So we're going to select the div corresponding to that message, so its ID is a login message, and then we're going to change its HTML content, okay, to the content of the data variable, okay. So let's save. Now let's go to the login.php file and write code for the login process. So we're going to start the session, okay, or restart the previous session using the session start function, okay. We're going to need to have PHP tags at the beginning and the end of our code. I'm going to tidy up these comments. They look like this at the moment because they were thought by Brackets to be HTML comments. So I'm going to just pause the video and just tidy them up for PHP, okay? Okay, so now let's connect to the database, okay? So you're going to use exactly the same syntax as before. So we'll just include the connection file. All right. Okay. Now we're going to check the user inputs. So as usual, we're going to define the error messages first, okay? And then we're going to get the inputs. So we're going to have a couple of error messages, missing email and missing password, okay? So for missing email, so let's create a paragraph, okay? So later on, we're going to wrap these paragraphs inside a div and give the div some styling. So for missing email, we're going to have, please enter your email address, okay? So we can make the message bold by adding the strong tags like this. And the next one is going to be missing password. Okay. And we're going to have more or less the same thing. Okay. Please enter your password. Now let's get the inputs. So we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did in the sign up code. Okay. So let's just copy the code and adjust it. So for the email, okay, so you're going to check if the email is empty, okay, and then we're going to add the missing email error, okay. Otherwise, we're going to filter the email using the filter sanitize email, and we don't need to validate the email, okay, as we're going to be only checking the combination of the email and password. Okay, we're not going to be doing any sorts of registration of data. Okay, so we don't have to validate the email. So let's delete this bit. Okay. Now regarding the name of the inputs, if you look at the login form, the name of the email inputs is called login email. Okay. So it's not email like in the sign up form. Okay. Now let's do the same thing for the password. So the name for the password inputs is login password. Okay, and the variable is going to be password, and the error is missing password. And when we filter the password, we're going to filter it as a string, so we're going to use filter sanitize string. Okay. Alright, so far we got the user inputs, and also we stored the errors in the errors variable. Okay, so we covered this step as well. Alright. Now we're going to check if there are any errors. Okay, so if the errors variable is not empty, okay, or if errors, then we're going to echo an error message. All right. So we're going to go to the sign up code and copy the same code from there because it's very similar. All right. And then we're going to have an else statement. Okay, for no errors. Okay, so if we have no errors, then we're going to prepare the variables for the query in the same way we have done in the sign up file. Okay, so we're going to have the email and password. So let's prepare these two variables for the query. And also we're going to have to use the hash function. Okay, so okay, and now we're going to create a query and then run it. Okay, so the query is going to check if the combination of the email and password provided exists in the users table. Okay, so the query is going to be as following. So we're going to create a variable SQL. Okay, so we're going to select from our table, okay, users. we're going to select star. Okay, so we're going to select all the records from the table where the following condition is fulfilled. Okay, so using the parentheses is optional. Okay, so you can still have this without the parentheses. So the first parameter is going to be email, okay, equals the provided email, and then the password equals the provided password, or the hashed password. And we want the user to be activated. So we're going to check also the activation field, and we're going to make sure that the user is activated. Okay, so the activation field should be activated like this. Okay. Now let's run the query and store the results in the variable that we're going to call results. Okay, MySQLi underscore query, which is going to take as parameters the link variable and the query itself. Okay. Now to check if we have a match, we're going to need to look into our results objects and make sure that we've got only one row inside this object. Okay, so to do this, we're going to check if the number of rows inside this object is 1. So first, let's create a variable that we're going to call count, where we're going to store the output of the function MySQLi number of rows of our object's results. Okay, so if count equals 1, okay, then we're going to log our user and return a success message. Okay, so first we're going to need to fetch that row using the fetch array function. So this function has been covered in the PHP MySQL chapters, okay, quite in detail. So let's create a variable that we're going to call row, where we're going to store that single row. So we're going to use the function MySQLi fetch array. Okay, so again, this function takes a couple of parameters. So the first one is going to be our result object, and the second one is an optional parameter which will specify how we would like our row to be returned. So we can have either an associative array or a numeric array or both. Okay, so I'm going to go for an associative array. So the parameter is going to be MySQLi underscore associative, like this. All right. Then to log our user, we're going to set the session variables. So we're going to store inside our session array, okay, the values that we're going to find inside that row. So we're going to start with the user ID. Okay, so we're going to have a value for the user ID, which will correspond to the value corresponding to user ID inside the row. Okay, and then we're gonna have one for the username, and another one for the email. Okay, so I went for all these because we're going to need them later. Okay, either for the profile page or for the main page logged in page. Okay, so originally we wanted to print an error if they don't match, so we can actually check if the count is different than 1. Okay, then print an error and then have an else statement. Okay, like this. Okay, so first let's print an error if the count is different than 1. So let's copy an error message from the sign up code. Okay, let's get that one. And let's say something like wrong username or password. Okay. Now we are going to check if the user has actually checked the remember me box. Okay, so if they did that, okay, then we're going to have some code. Okay, otherwise we're going to return success straight away. So if they haven't checked that box, which means that we don't have a post variable, okay, corresponding to remember me, like that. So if you remember, the name of that input is remember me, we can use the empty function instead of that. So if that's empty, we're going to echo success straight away. Okay, otherwise we're going to have some code for the remember me process. Okay, so far we have done that one, and we have done that one as well. Now let's have a quick look at our code. So of course a semicolon missing from that statement. Okay, also if we look at the query, okay, that from needs to be in capital letters, and we've got and password and activation. Okay, also right after running the query, it is good practice to make sure that the query has actually run successfully. So we're going to need to check if the query has run successfully, as we did in the sign up file. Okay, so to do this, we can just copy this piece of code. Okay, so let's save and test our code for now. So if we submit an empty form, okay, we're only expecting the first two errors. We're not expecting that one. So let's have a quick look at what's happening in the code. Okay. So if there are any errors, okay, we print an error message. Else we prepare the variables for the query, and then we run the query. So actually this curly bracket needs to be closed after running the query. Okay, and doing all these checks. So that needs to be closed right at the end here. So let's save and refresh again. Okay, we're getting the right error messages. So now let's provide correct details. Okay, it's working. So it's logging me in, and I'm redirected to the notes page. Okay. So in the next video, we're going to cover the remember me code.